Hey YouTube, pretty excited today. I finally got some time to work on one of my projects. I've got several going right now, but this one's finally moving forward. This is a transmission from a crf70. It's the same transmission that's in a crf50, xr50, xr70. I had to rebuild the transmission. When I got the bike, it was a basket case. It wouldn't run, or the engine would run, but it just couldn't shift gears because some of the teeth had broken off of some of the gears. So tore it apart, was able to replace the parts, and finally got everything assembled. So I was just about to reassemble the engine, and I thought this would make a great video for people that are curious. Before I go over how the transmission actually works, I just want to go over the names of the different pieces. Basically three pieces to the transmission. You have the main shaft, you have the counter shaft. The counter shaft turns in the opposite direction of the main shaft. The counter shaft is also known as the output shaft because the counter shaft actually exits the engine case, and this is where the front sprocket would be mounted, and that front sprocket would drive the chain. Between the two shafts, we have the drum assembly. The drum assembly is what actually attaches to the shift lever. When you upshift or downshift, you rotate the drum assembly, and what that does is it moves these two shift forks, and they move to specific locations in different gear selections. So there would be first, second, third, and that will actually shift the gears, creating the different gear ratios. So what constant mesh means is that you have one gear on one shaft, one gear on the other shaft, and those gears are always in contact. So this is third gear. Third gear is always contacting its third gear on the opposite shaft. This is second gear, always in contact. This is first gear, always in contact. Well, the gears are not actually the same. Three of the gears are splined gears. Three of the gears are unsplined gears, or freewheeling gears. And probably the best way to explain that is actually to go through the individual gears. And what we'll do is we'll start off in neutral. In neutral, the engine can be turning, but there's no output. So, how can it do this? Well, what we see is that when the main shaft is turning, only two of the gears on the main shaft are turning. The first gear are turning, and the third gear are turning. Second gear is not turning. Second gear is not turning because it is a freewheeling gear. It's not directly connected to the main shaft. On the counter shaft, we see that third gear is turning and first gear is turning, but those two gears are not directly connected to the counter shaft. When the shift forks are in this position, there is no output. There is no direct connection between the main shaft and the counter shaft. So let's start by shifting into first gear. So we've shifted from neutral into first gear, and I'll do it a couple times so you guys can actually see what's happening. So hopefully you guys can see that the second gear actually drops down into the first gear. Now, what we realized in neutral is that the first gear on the main shaft is directly splined to the main shaft. So when the main shaft turns, the first gear turns. That gear is in constant mesh with this gear. So first gear is now turning the second gear. Now how does it do that? Well, the second gear has gearing that connect to the first gear. So when the shift fork pushes the second gear on the counter shaft into the first gear, these teeth, known as dog teeth, fit into notches onto the first gear. And now, with second gear attached to the first gear, and since the second gear on the counter shaft is a spline gear, when the second gear turns on the counter shaft, you have output. So let's try second gear. And I'll go from first gear to second gear several times so you guys can see what happens. Well, this one actually has two things that are happening. You see that the second gear is disengaging from the first gear, and you see the third gear is engaging with the second gear. And why is that important? Well, if we look at this broken transmission, you can see some of the teeth that were broken off. Normally, second gear on the main shaft is free-wheeling. It's not splined to the shaft. Third gear is. So third gear will drop down, and now second gear will turn when the main is turned. And this is actually the direction that the engine would turn in. So I don't know, I always think it's kind of interesting that in order for the bike to be in second gear, third gear is actually what's driving the second gear. Okay, so let's put it in third gear now. So we're going to shift. I don't know if you guys see that. So what's happened is third gear on the main shaft, and I'll use the pen, my fingers are huge. Third gear has disengaged from the second gear, and the second gear on the counter shaft is actually engaged to the freewheeling third gear on the counter shaft. So now we have a direct connection. This shaft is turning this splined gear. This splined gear is turning this freewheeling gear. The freewheeling gear is now engaged to the splined second gear on the counter shaft. And now we have our third and final speed. Second gear. First gear. And neutral. Okay guys, I know it can be a little bit tricky. Hopefully this helps somebody. I'm kind of excited. Hopefully I get this bike back together. Thanks a lot guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks. Bye.